Learned Commissioners, while we're just waiting for the witness to take the stand, may I mention as a courtesy that the deceased former Minister of Defence's widow and daughter and son-in-law have come to make an appearance at the Commission, and they have been seated in a front row because Mrs. Mudisa would value the opportunity to put a few questions to the witness. Regrettably, she is not represented, as this comes as somewhat of a surprise, and we don't have the relevant mandates in place, but she is going to do the necessary without legal representation. Thank you.
Thank you. Can the witness take the stand?
Mr. Chair, if I can assist, I went outside, they're not there. I understand they may have gone downstairs to a coffee shop. I don't know whether you want to take a short adjournment. Somebody did go down in order to try and locate them.
Thank you. I'll wait, Celia. I think in that case, rather than us waiting for them, sit here and wait for them, maybe let's adjourn for another 5-10 minutes, and as soon as they come, then we'll reconvene. Thank you.
angazi noma ufuyithatha ngomhlanje ngoba national constant ufuna ukuzithatha mhlawumbe ukushaya uzayisebenzisa manje uzaqala yeah iza
Mfethu, umsizile. Ngishaya ibhek focus angisazi nje.
Good morning, everybody. Can the witness confirm that he's still under oath?
I do, Chair.
Thank you. Who is going to start the cross-examination?
Mr. Chair, we had discussions, and it appears that the consensus is that I will start if you are satisfied with the arrangement.
Thank you. You can go ahead.
Dr. Woods, you testified yesterday that in your submissions and in your evidence, you attempted to build a picture or a case indicating that widespread or that corruption in fact took place relating to the arms procurement deal. Did I understand you correct?
Mostly correct, through you, Chair. I attempted to build a picture to show the probability of corruption, but nowhere do I actually claim that there was corruption.
I'm sorry, Dr. Woods, I didn't quite understand the last portion of your answer.
Chair, the picture I attempted to build through the provision of evidence and through three fundamental arguments was a picture which suggests that there was a strong probability of corruption as opposed to there being corruption. I was very careful not at any point to imply that my picture indicates that there was corruption.
That's very interesting, Dr. Woods. So, as you sit there, it's not your evidence that there was indeed corruption relating to the arms procurement transaction. All you say is that, in your view, there's a probability of corruption.
That is correct, Chair. I think, and I stressed this in my introduction yesterday, I stressed it in the conclusion, and I referred to the building of a case to show that there was probability. I never went beyond that.
You then further testified that you provided the Commission with a compelling picture, you mentioned, and further you stated that you handed pretty hard evidence to the Commission in this regard. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is, of course, in your view.
Yeah, of course, yes.
Well, I think let us then investigate the basis of the view that you express. The first issue is, of course, I understand it to be common cause that you never claimed that you have personal knowledge of any of the facts that you rely on.
That is correct. I've never claimed publicly to have any evidence, and I've never made allegations in public that there is corruption.
Mr. Murani yesterday referred to it as direct evidence. I prefer to refer to it as personal knowledge. But you agree with me, you have no personal knowledge relating to any of the facts that you have been dealing with in your submission and or in your evidence.
No, I do have personal knowledge of a number of the issues I referred to yesterday, but none of them were, there were issues regarding circumstances that, in my building the picture, they helped to accumulate together with the secondary sources I referred to suggest this probability.
Well, relating to the allegations, factual allegations of secret payments of certain amounts being paid to people, allegations of that nature, the 30 million that you refer to going to President Mbeki, those type of facts referring to specific payments and or advantages that went to any person you have no personal knowledge of?
No.
We can summarize your evidence to say that all that you actually did in that regard was to present the Commission with certain newspaper articles and or emails suggesting unlawful conduct in that regard.
I think that's an unfair way of putting it. Again, it appears that one tries to dismiss us on the basis of newspaper articles. These newspaper articles were the vehicle which carried some important information, I believe. For example, referred to investigations which had particular findings which were acknowledged by supply companies. So there's a strong factual basis. It's not simply just, any old newspaper article.
But it remains newspaper articles.
There were a great number of newspaper reports that I used in my testimony. That's correct.
Well, the fact is, Dr. Woods, is that your submissions and evidence, you will certainly agree with me, will only have value insofar as we accept the correctness and reliability of those facts contained in these newspaper articles and or in the emails. We'll deal with them.
Yes, as suggested yesterday, the statement I made and the case that I attempted to build by way of that statement, I was hopeful that it would be useful to the Commission and that it would give them some perspectives, give them some leads which they, with their powers, would be able to follow through with if they so chose. So I don't think I attempted to do anything more than that.
No, but you haven't answered my question. Please answer the question.
I do apologize. Would you repeat it, please?
Your submissions and evidence in that regard will only have value insofar as we accept the correctness and the reliability of the facts contained in those sources that you relied on, the newspaper articles and the emails.
Yes, but in addition, it'll also hopefully have value because of the analysis I make of those reports that I referred to.
Are you referring now to the inferences that you draw from those sources, and are you referring to that now as an analysis?
Yes, in academic research that is known as analysis.
That's fine. So what you say, in addition to the newspaper articles and the emails, you also presented the Commission with your opinions and inferences which you drew from those sources.
And as far as a suggested probability in some cases, yes.
Well, it's easy, Dr. Woods. If a particular newspaper article misstated the correct and or true facts, that will have a material influence on the reliability of your submissions.
You are correct that it would have an effect, but I I tried to present more than one newspaper article to support critical issues, and if one looks at the totality of my supporting documentation, I think a document here and there that might contain errors, I don't believe would detract from my overall analysis and conclusions.
That's a very interesting approach. Would you say that's a scientific approach to follow that if two newspapers states something, then it must be true? If only one states the fact, there may be a problem to accept it, but if two newspapers state the fact, then we should accept that as true.
Not exactly. As I repeatedly told you yesterday, these newspaper reports were chosen very carefully with regard to who wrote them, what the source of the information was, what they had done to corroborate that information, who they'd spoken to. So if there are two newspaper reports saying more or less the same thing, I would look at to see whether they had exercised independent minds.
That's very interesting. So what you say is, if certain journalists present a newspaper article, you can accept it as true, others you should doubt.
Yeah, one couldn't go as far as saying you accept it as true, but one does evaluate the article and try to assess the likelihood that it is accurate by the ways in which I've already mentioned.
That's ridiculous, Dr. Woods. Do you say that you already confirmed that you have no personal knowledge whatsoever? You can now evaluate an article making factual allegations as to facts that you have no knowledge of, and then decide without knowledge that it's true or not true?
Could you remind me of factual allegations I've made?
No, Dr. Woods, you must listen to the question. You say, you just testified that you evaluate the article and you carefully selected the articles. Did I understand you correct?
You heard me correctly?
Now, what I'm putting to you, it's ridiculous to suggest that you, without any factual knowledge, you already admitted to that, can now evaluate a press article in which certain facts are stated, and then you evaluate it and decide whether it's true or not true. On what basis can you do that?
Well, perhaps we should have a look at a few examples. I get press reports regarding a serious fraud office investigation in the UK into BAE. They quote the findings, as do a number of other newspapers. BAE accept the findings. I believe that constitutes a good secondary source of information to support the case I'm building. I refuse to allow you to take me beyond that.
Dr. Woods, with the greatest of respect, where did BAE ever accept the allegations of corruption?
You know, I quoted yesterday from the Hansard in the UK Parliament from a minister who accepted. Why don't you get the Hansard and check for yourself?
Dr. Woods, you invited me to look at an example. Please turn to page 86 of your bundle. Now, that is Annexure GGW 12A, on which you relied for the allegation that my client received secret payments of up to 200 million rand in commission relating to the sale of the 26 Grippens. Am I correct?
Could you repeat that, please?
I stated to you that on page 86 of your bundle, we find exhibit or annexure GGW 12A. Am I correct?
You are.
And annexure GGW 12A is one of the two sources that you relied on for the statement that you've made in paragraph 20 of your submissions, where you stated that Shlongwane received secret payments of up to 200 million in commission relating to the sale of 26 Grippens. Am I correct?
Those were two statements that I made reference to, yes.
Is the answer to my question then yes?
Well, when you say rely on, I'm not sure what you mean. And so I'll just say I use them as reference points, as you can see for yourself in my statement, and them amongst many others. Many other reports I referred to, as I say, hopefully allowed me to accumulate secondary source evidence and to build a case.
Dr. Woods, now look at the newspaper article, GGW 12A. Is that a newspaper article that appeared in the Sunday Times, if I have it correct? Or if not, can you tell us where did you find this article?
I recorded it, I think, as a Scopa produced article. I don't think I have noted the exact newspaper it came into.
It's apparent from this article that the source of the article was a press statement issued by Saab. Am I correct?
My reading of the article doesn't say expressly that Saab issued the statement.
It doesn't say it expressly, Dr. Woods, but it's clear from the content that it relies on the press statement issued by Saab. It's commenced in the first paragraph to say that Swedish defense group Saab yesterday admitted that millions were paid to clinch a South African contract for fighter jets, but said its erstwhile British partner BAE Systems had paid the bribes.
You are reading from the article correctly?
Well, that's indicative of the fact that this article emanates from the press statement issued by Saab.
I would tend to agree with you.
I suppose it becomes more evident even, Dr. Woods, but thank you for agreeing, that the press statement from Saab was issued on the 16th of June 2011, and it appears that this article was dated the 17th of June 2011, according to the note written on it. Am I correct? Just have a look at the handwritten note on page 86 on the article itself. I suppose you made it there.
You're referring to the date?
Yes.
Yeah, what I see there is 17th of the 6th month, and I'm not quite sure what the year is because it appears the article has maybe chopped it. So it's either 11 or 14 or I don't know.
Maybe my copy is better than yours, Dr. Woods. It's absolutely clear. It's 17 June 2011.
Maybe if I can also help, the copy that I have clearly says that 17th June stroke 11. It doesn't say 14.
Absolutely.
It says stroke 11.
Thank you for your assistance. I accept what you're seeing there.
Now, have you ever seen or read the SARB press release?
No, I have not.
You must just put off your microphone. Are you telling the Commission that you've included this article relying on a press statement by SARB making extremely serious allegations without checking what the press release in fact stated?
What I do recall is that on the issue of the SARB investigation, that there were a number of press releases which I had in my possession. As I told you early on, I would select a few which hopefully captured succinctly the point that I wish to make in my statement. I recall...
I'm sorry, Dr. Woods. Can you speak directly into the mic? I'm battling to hear you.
Chair, I'm speaking directly into the mic. I think we need to get some attention to the system. And of those collection of articles I'd have in this instance regarding the SARB investigation, I do recall, I believe I recall parts of the statement, but no, I have never seen or received or possessed a copy of the full statement as was issued by SARB.
Must I take that for a long no?
If your question says, have I seen the original statement or a copy thereof, then yes, you could take it as a no.
So are you telling the Commission that you are including in your submission allegations of the worst kind, where allegedly the partner of BAE stated without any doubt that BAE Systems paid bribes, and you didn't take the time to check on the press release by SARB to make sure that that was indeed what SARB said?
Well, firstly, as I said, I had a number of reports on the SARB investigation, all of which I read, and I felt from those, and from the two I've included in this bundle, in my view, it was sufficient to make the point that there was an investigation and that there were certain findings which had been acknowledged. And I thought that was sufficient for the type of case and the type of method I'm using to build that case. And you can try and take me down all sorts of roads. It's not the type of case I was trying to build, conclusive evidence and getting into the minutiae of these reports.
I would really appreciate you answering the questions straightforward, Dr. Woods. So what you say, and must I infer from this long answer again, that you made these serious defamatory statements and included that in your submission without checking the source of the article to ensure that it has been correctly reported.
I made no serious defamatory allegations. I simply referred to these press articles in my statement as I built my case. You know, you don't want long answers, but you sometimes compel me to repeat myself and repeat myself. I'm not going to change my story.
Dr. Woods, you accuse Mr. Shlangwane in your submission, and you repeated it under oath yesterday, that he received secret payments relating to the sale of 26 grippins. Am I correct? Is that part of your submission, and was that part of your evidence?
Once again, you are not correct. My statement simply refers to some press articles, and in this case, that say certain things. I'm not going to let you bring it into the first person. You must read my statement and see how it's composed.
Dr. Woods, what I found very difficult to understand is that the SARP press release was easily available. Would you agree with that?
I'm sure I could have got hold of it quite easily.
You could have asked the evidence leaders, because it's before the commission already. It was part of Mr. Mainier's submissions.
You're informing me, are you? Yeah.
What I further inform you is that this article is outrageously scandalous, because there's no basis for the very first paragraph suggesting or alleging that SARP, in fact, accused the British partner BAE Systems of receiving or paying bribes.
Yeah, they referred to commissions that were paid, from what I read.
I can read to you what they said in this regard. They said, in this regard, a person employed by BAE Systems has, without SARP's knowledge, signed a for us unknown contract. And from that, the reporter stated that a Swedish defense group, SARP, yesterday admitted that millions were paid to clinch a South African contract for fighter jets, but said its erstwhile British partners, BAE Systems, had paid the bribes. I put it to you that this article is scandalous and outrageous in misstating the facts.
You're entitled to your opinion.
Just hold on, Dr. Toes. Is that proposition correct or not?
Chair, I would need to go into it in a bit more detail before I conceded that I had included a press report which was not altogether accurate. I can't, without engaging the issue in a little more depth.
What I attempt to illustrate, Dr. Woods, is that you relied on sources that is clearly misstating the facts. And that is to illustrate to you, when I dealt with your evidence, to say that it has only got value insofar as there can be a finding that the facts contained in these sources are absolutely and unconditionally correct. Now I've indicated to you that, in fact, your sources are scandalously misstating the facts.
I hear what you're saying.
I would like to hear your comment.
I don't have a comment. You're exercising your opinion with some very strong adjectives, and I'm listening.
Why am I not surprised that you cannot comment on that? Because it goes to the very root of the value of your submissions and your evidence, Dr. Woods.
Well, that's your opinion again.
For the same proposition, you relied on a second source, and you can just turn the page. That is Annexure GGW12B that we find on page 87 of the same bundle. Am I correct?
If you're referring to GGW 12B. Yes, I have it in front of me.
What I stated to you was that the second source that you included with reference to paragraph 20 of your submissions was GGW 12B. You'll find that on page 9 of your report, of your submission.
I think you're correct.
Now, let's evaluate Annexure GGW 12B. I want you to go to the 5th paragraph. It starts off with a quote, starting with the consultant who received. Do you have it in front of you?
So you could just point out the paragraph again, please?
The 5th one from the top, the consultant who received the secret payments.
I'm with you now, thank you.
Now, if you keep your finger there and you turn to page 9 of your submission to paragraph 20, you will see that paragraph 20 actually emanates from this paragraph in GGW 12B.
I believe you're correct.
Well, it's almost word for word the same. Paragraph 20 reads, Shlongwane received secret payments of up to 200 million rand in commissions relating to the sale of the 26 Grippens. I refer in this regard to annexes GGW 12A and GGW 12B. The paragraph in GGW12B reads, the consultant who received the secret payments is reportedly Fana Shlongwane, who was an advisor to the former Minister of Defence, Joe Mudisa, and who has alleged to have received up to 200 million rand in commission relating to the acquisition of 26 Gripen fighter jets from Saab / British Aerospace. Am I correct?
Yes, you are.
Now, it appears from what we read, what I've just read to you from GGW12B, is in fact a quote from something that Mr. Maynier said. Am I correct?
I don't have a clue what Mr. Maynier said.
But what you can do, Dr. Woods, in your scientific approach is to just look at the document. It is clear from the document that what I've read to you now is a quote from something that Mr. Maynier said, not so?
I don't know if he said it. Sorry.
Dr. Woods, don't play games. It's clear that it is a quote. and it's clear after the quote, it states Meinier said. Now what else can you infer from that, Dr. Woods?
I'm sorry, Dr. Woods, this is a document that we got from you. After that quotation, it says, Mr. Meinier said. Now, how can you possibly say that you don't know what Mr. Meinier said?
Well, he's only just pointed out to me that that's at the end of that sentence. But yes, I acknowledge that it's quoting him. I thought he was initially referring to Mr. Mainier's evidence before the Commission.
Don't be disingenuous now, Dr. Woods. Please, you're under oath.
Please don't get personal and critical and insulting like you were yesterday.
Dr. Woods, now we know Mr. Meinier testified approximately 2-3 weeks ago in this commission, and he unequivocally stated to this commission that he has no knowledge of these facts, nor can he stand in for the reliability and or the correctness of any of the documents that he referred to. Are you aware of that evidence?
You're referring to Mr. Mainier's evidence before the Commission? I'm not aware of that evidence.
Well, I'm putting to you that is what he testified. Do you accept that? Or will do it, must I show you the evidence?
I'll take your word for it.
Now, if we then evaluate your submissions, the basis of the allegations against my client, Mr. Shlongwane, is to be found in paragraph 20 of your submission. And you referred to two sources that will substantiate what is there. The one is GGW 12A, which is a scandalous article misstating the facts in all material respects, and the other emanates from a person who testified under oath in this commission that he has no knowledge of any of these facts and he does not stand in for the reliability and or the correctness of any of the documentation in this regard.
I take your point. And while one cannot make excuses for the pressure we were placed under to put this together and put the bundle together, I realize I would have served my case better by including a number of the other reports, the reports that refer to this matter, including one which says SARB has admitted that a contract was signed between its subsidiary, SANEP, and Hlongwane to pay Frene Hlongwane 24 million rand, and that the payment was an inducement for Frene Hlongwane to secure the Gripen deal. That amongst many other statements, I should have included them.
Dr. Woods, I cannot deal with material that you decided not to include. So please let us stick with the facts and or the documentation that you decided and preferred to put before the Commission, please.
I agree with you.
You will agree with me that if one has then regard to your submissions and evidence in this regard relating to this serious allegation against my client, it's completely valueless if we base it on your submissions and your evidence of yesterday.
You know, completely valueless is a value judgment. So I don't really know what you mean by that.
Well, let me explain. You don't have any personal knowledge of this allegation or the facts contained in this allegation. Am I right?
You're right.
The sources that you rely on is clearly not worth the paper it has been written on. Do you agree with that?
It's when you use this colorful language that you lose me a bit. You know, if you could just speak straight in a measured tone, I'm sure I'd be able to be more responsive. But the paper it was written on, what do you mean by that?
I mean, Dr. Woods, that the sources that you relied on does not corroborate what you stated in paragraph 20.
I do agree it falls short. The two items are included fall short of the type of secondary source evidence and the value thereof that I wish to include in those relating to paragraphs 20 and 21.
Dr. Woods, I want to put it to you, one can take a couple of days to illustrate to you that what I've illustrated by this example, by this basis allegation against my client, holds actually true for your whole submission.
I think only time will prove you correct or incorrect.
With reference to your allegations and or evidence yesterday stating that BAE acknowledged that they paid money to agents without them having done anything to in fact justify the payments. Have you ever taken the time to read the submissions by BAE to this commission?
No, I haven't. I wasn't aware there were any BAE submissions.
Because what I can put to you, Dr. Woods, is that BAE in great detail explained exactly the reasons for involving agents and for payments to agents. Absolutely the contrary to what you alleged yesterday.
Oh, good. I'm sure the Commission will indulge that information together with my report and will make up its own minds, and together with other submissions on the subject.
The other submissions now, the newspaper articles that you included in your submission.
I suspect that there will be further submissions on this subject, and I will forewarn those people to be more substantive than what I was.
Well, I stand to be corrected, Dr. Woods, but I'm not aware of any person who testified before this commission making the allegation from knowledge that in fact bribes had been paid.
Sorry, the statement I just made refers to future people who will testify. I said I suspect there will, amongst their testimony, that there will be more evidence submitted in this regard, and I will certainly forewarn them that they are likely to come under attack from yourself.
I have no objection that you forewarn them, Dr. Woods. Are you agreeing, or haven't you got knowledge of the fact that what I've put to you is that there was not a single, as far as I know, allegation from a person with knowledge, personal knowledge in this regards, that any bribes had been paid relating to the arms procurement transaction?
If you're referring to those witnesses who have testified thus far, I haven't read through their complete submissions, but you know, when I'd switched off this arm deal years ago until I had this surprise subpoena from the chair, the reason for which I've never understood, having not ever claimed to have evidence or made any allegations. So I've had to, in a very short space of time, try and compile something that would be useful to the Commission. I qualified it yesterday and explaining my approach in great detail. So I'm still in a process of catch-up. I probably have at least 2,000 documents I never even had an opportunity to go through. In this particular instance, as I said, I probably have I do have a number of more documents. I probably have, I hate to guess, but scores of reports on Frene Hlangwana receiving monies. So there's a lot. There's a lot I wish I'd had time to take into account in a more considered way. But I am accepting that the two reference documents I've used here are not sufficiently adequate.
It's not a question of not being sufficiently adequate, Dr. Woods. It's completely unacceptable. Based on objective facts.
That is your opinion.
Dr. Woods, I want to put to you that your submissions and evidence, in fact, provided this commission with not a single fact that is either admissible or reliable or to be believed in any way whatsoever.
You know, that's just simply outrageous, and it just demonstrates very clearly where you're coming from and how desperate you are to serve your client, which is, I suppose, what he pays you for.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Advocate Sele. What was the agreement? Who was supposed to be next? Mr. Choi.
Thanks, Chairperson. I will be next. Dr. Woods, if we turn to page 31 of your statement, especially having regard to paragraph 74 of the statement, you seem to suggest that the DTI has not given any kind of business plan, or maybe suggesting that they didn't consider any business plans for the projects which were approved or which were done for the NIP. There's evidence which is before the Commission is to the effect that before a project could be approved, business plans were supposed to have been given. Do you have any evidence which suggests that that kind of evidence before this Commission is incorrect?
As I explained yesterday, and with respect, I did it in some detail, what they referred to as business plans, which they required to be submitted by the seller in order to gain approval by the NIP implementing mechanism of the investment project, required had a few requirements. Four, in fact. What I'm saying is those fall very short of what is accepted in the business world as a business plan. And in no ways do these requirements ensure that the NIPs that are being proposed have been properly researched, that the NIP which in most cases is a business initiative, would be profitable, where market surveys were done, and all the other many projections and demographic studies that are required to constitute a proper business plan. My direct evidence here is that in one of my discussions with Amachi, I asked them to take me through how they had compiled theirs, and it confirmed exactly what I'm saying, that the requirements are very few and far between. And if you look at the DTI report earlier this year, the consequences are quite clear, and the reasons for so many of these having been failed, or having been exchanged, or having been for other ideas, or where they simply have not materialized, would, in my opinion, be because of an inadequate business plan. So that's what I'm trying to capture in this paragraph, and what I did explain yesterday. I hope I've answered your question fully.
Yes, Dr. Woods, what we would like to hear from you is whether indeed there were business plans. So is your answer that there were indeed business plans, but according to your own view, they were not adequate?
Yes, that's my view, and I think it's a view I can substantiate without too much trouble, or we could get it independently substantiated. Frustratingly, both the Auditor General, and they makes reference to it in the JIT report, his forensic guys were refused access to the business plans. I requested copies of them in Parliament, and Minister Irwin, under something called commercial confidentiality, consistently refused to give anyone access. I tried to use Section 56 of the Constitution, which gives Parliament's powers to have access to every document, but at that point, the majority in the committee outvoted me in saying the committee does not want to see those documents. So what I'm telling you is I haven't been able to personally see the business plans that were of the winning prime contractors.
So if you have not seen yourself the business plans, is it fair for you to assume that those business plans didn't conform with the requirements?
No, I'm assuming they did conform with the requirement, but that the requirement was grossly inadequate.
Maybe we can move forward to page 32 of your statement. One having regard to paragraph 76. In the statement you make there is that the costing deal of the hawks and griffins appear to indicating such a loading of price. This is actually as an example that the NIP performance was loaded in the prices. For instance, I will suggest that the overpricing of certain armaments. Do you have any kind of proof to suggest the actual price of the hawks and the griffins?
No, I don't. If I'd had proof, I wouldn't have said it appears to indicate such a loading. I did explain the appears to be part. I explained that the affordability study suggests that this is probably what happened. I think the JIT report suggests it as well. And as I told you, amongst confidential documents which I have, certain of which would constitute direct evidence, but which I erred on the side of caution by not including in my bundle or with reference to, but I did tell you I do have copies of the costings which I got from Chippy Shake on the Hawks and Griffins, and after many questions he was unable to explain what certain large add-on amounts were. He tried to deceive me after consultation with the Air Force on the case of the Hawks. We said a certain large amount of development costs, constituted a glass cockpit. But I was able to prove that the original price actually included that, and the Hawks of very similar specification that were bought by Australia the year before had a glass cockpit included, and they paid a price, I'm open to correction, but like 40% less than what we paid. So I was not able to get an explanation as to what these huge add-on prices were. So in fairness, I think that to me appears to be what the affordability study was concerned about.
But in your own knowledge, you have no proof of the actual prices of the Hawks or the Gripens. You cannot testify to say these are the actual amounts and these amounts is a difference of the inflated amount which included the NIP.
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. So, Chairperson, I have no further questions.
Dr. Wood, would I be correct to say that if you don't know what the actual cost of the Hawk or of a Gripen should have been, you cannot make a statement and say that, you know, the price that we paid, that we paid more than what we should have paid?
I don't believe I made the statement that we paid more than we should have paid.
Let's use the word excessive, the one that you used then.
I didn't hear you. I beg your pardon, Chair.
Which word did you use? Excessive? Or that the prices were loaded? The words that you have used in paragraph 26 is that the costs were loaded, which I thought it means one and the same thing. Let's use the word that the prices were loaded.
Chair, are you referring to the discussion I've just had with the previous questioner? Are you? Yes, in that discussion, I referred to my citing of the costings, of which I have copies, and in my attempts to try and substantiate certain amounts which were added on to the price of the aeroplane. And I mentioned that the response I'd got proved not to be correct. I explained why I believed so, and by deduction, and I believe this would be any reasonable person's way of thinking, what I have would appear. It would appear that there was a loading of prices in the absence of any other explanation from the military.
Dr. Woods, do you know, in your view, how much should we have paid for one Hawk? And how much should we have paid for one Gripen?
Chair, I haven't brought that information with me, but yes, there was a shelf price. There were prices of all the other Hawk deals that had taken place within this range of time. One had to be very careful on that. Specifications are often very different, like the Hawks, the US Navy bought couldn't really be compared. But yeah, through a source, I also received details of the specifications of the Australian Hawk, and I thought it constituted a reasonable comparison, seeing as it had been bought the year before, and because the specifications are that similar. But I just made the point that the prices were that different. But so I have quite a lot of information. But once again, Chair, you know, how much information should I have brought before you?
So it's for you to decide what information you should give us, because you are the one who knows what information you have. I was just asking a simple question. You are talking about loading of prices. I'm just trying to find out a simple question. How much did we pay for the Hawk, and how much should we have paid for the Hawk according to you? And two, of course, this next question will be, you're talking about the specifications. Was our specifications the same as the Australian specifications? If the answer is yes, then you will have to tell us how do you come to that conclusion.
Well, Chair, would you like me to go away and do an exercise for you?
No, talking about what we have said before us now. If you're told you don't have any information to substantiate what is contained in some of your evidence, say so. I don't want you to go and do a research. We'll do the research. I thought what is contained in a statement, this is what you know. I don't want you to go and do a research.
Okay, let me take a shortcut then, Chair. I refer you to the JRT report. There's quite a lot to be said on the price and whether it was excessive or not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, by the way, you had finished your cross-examination.
I did, Chairperson. Thanks.
Thank you. Apparently, Mrs. Mudisa.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. I have had for years baseless allegations about Joe Mudisa. And these allegations have been going on, as I've been saying, even yesterday. And such allegations have caused my family a great deal of suffering. I have heard yesterday that Dr. Woods has said that Mr. Mudisa has benefited from the arms deal. I just would like to know, what is it that he has benefited according to you? Not only that, what evidence do you have except from the newspapers that we've been reading for years concretely that you can put here that this is what Mudisa has benefited? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Mudisa. And first, I do regret the situation and the pain that you've gone through, and I am aware there has been a lot of speculative allegations about the late Minister Mudisa. Yeah, I was asked a question yesterday about who of the cabinet of that time, I believed had received money, and I did say that, according to the information I had, I only had references to Mr. Mudisa having received money. I was appalled last night at the very inaccurate and irresponsible report on ETV, which claimed I had said he was the biggest receiver of bribes. And I can only ask you to look at the transcripts that come out here and see for yourself what I actually said. But yes, I did say that, according to my information. Yesterday afternoon, I produced, once again, it was a report, a media report, but what it did include was a copy of a bank statement of a considerable sum of money, and the bank statement going to the account of J. Mudisa. I offered that. The chairperson also challenged me yesterday on what else I had on Mr. Mudisa. I have a few other things. There was a prosecutor by the name of Gerda Ferreira who compiled a dossier on the allegations concerning Mr. Mudisa, which made some fairly strong findings, but I don't have that, I can't present it. But I just want you to know that this has been looked into. There is information on record. One of the areas is Mr. Mudisa's share acquisition of Conlog, but to the best of our knowledge, it was not a majority shareholding, firstly, and secondly, it was suggested that he paid for those shares through a loan from a friend in Germany. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But part of the, as I recall from the prosecutor's investigation, brought into question the connection Mr. Mudisa had with BAE round about this time, and the fact that, so it was claimed as a fact anyway, that Conlog, after his acquisition of shares, received, I think it was the biggest nip from BAE. I think that was looked into. And there was another issue regarding another BAE NIP which went to the MK War Veterans Association, of which I believe Mr. Mudisa was patron at the time. That's all I know, but I don't think what I said yesterday went beyond that, and certainly, well, hopefully nothing that I said was irresponsible or inaccurate.
Just hold on, man, before you proceed. Dr. Woods, I heard you talking about banks' statements. Are you saying that there are bank statements that we have included in the bundle that you have given us? If so, on which page will the bank statements be?
Chair, if my evidence leader doesn't mind, I see he has it there. 31. It appears to be GGW 31. It's a copy of the bank statement, which is contained in a report.
Page 130.
Sorry, 30?
Page 130.
Page 130, I believe, Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I don't know whether my bundle is not correct, but I have no bank statement on page 130.
Dr. Woods, there's no bank statement on page 130.
It appears to be a deposit slip, but definitely not a bank statement.
You're correct, it's a deposit slip of money being allegedly paid into his account. My use of the wrong term there.
This is a newspaper report. This is a newspaper report.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
My second question is about the Conlog shares that you're talking about. Is it also included in this report?
No, I didn't include it in this report. It was not something that I was pursuing. As I said, simply in reply to a question yesterday, I made the remark that I did.
Okay. What you've been saying, Dr. Wood, with all due respect, is what you've also gathered from the newspapers and the media. We've all been reading about that. I want a concrete evidence of the benefits that Mudisa has received. And you mentioned, I think, what I've read many years back from the newspapers. Is there something that you can show to us that here's concrete proof? I can see this is another media press cuttings that you are referring to.
by all means, if you write to me and make that request, and I will see if I can get into Gerda Ferreira's, get information out of Gerda Ferreira's files, and I'll also make further inquiries. You know, I have no obligation to do that, but I would like to try and do that for you.
You know, Dr. Woods, this is a matter of public record. I've got it yesterday from the media that Joe Mudisa is the only one that has benefited, according to you. And I was saying, can you give me a list? You talk about some things that you didn't even submit here, that I've also read many a years back, and I'm trying to say to you, all what you're talking about, you've got it from, it's just statements from the media, like
Unsubstantiated.
and unsubstantiated.
One of the points I had to make yesterday on a number of occasions that the media has uncovered many instances of fraud and corruption over the years. And in virtually every case has proven to be correct. There are very few instances of where, you know, be it leases on buildings or on Kandla or whatever else, where the investigative journalists have proved to be incorrect. So I would urge you not to just dismiss it as a media report. But secondly, again, I feel terrible that the media have reported it in the way they have. But I want you to look at the truth that will be in the records of this commission. There are transcripts, and if I understand correctly, they go onto the internet. So I would feel you first need to know what I did say and what I didn't say. And then if you have an issue, a problem, I'll go out of my way to resolve that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my name is Wipuso Mudisa. I am the daughter of the late Minister Joe Mudisa. I would request permission to ask Dr. Woods a question.
You can go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Woods, my question to you is a simple one. You have, over the course of this morning, rehashed media reports, told us your opinion of those media reports, but we have asked you a simple and clear question. What concrete evidence do you have of Joe Mudisa's involvement in corrupt activities or benefits from the arms deal that were undue to the process? If you cannot provide concrete evidence to that end, please withdraw that statement because it's defamatory and it's unsubstantiated.
You're not listening to me, are you? Withdraw what statement? You don't even know what the statement was that I made.
This oral evidence that you submitted, you suggested or said that Joe Mudisa received benefits from the arms deal. The first question that my mother posed to you today was, what benefits are you referring to? And the second question was, what concrete evidence do you have of those benefits? If you cannot answer those two questions relating to the oral evidence that you submitted yesterday to this commission, please withdraw those statements. They are untrue.
Young lady, I don't take instructions from you.
Sir, you are speaking to this commission.
Just hold on. Doctor, just listen very carefully. She has made a certain proposition. If she's correct in that proposition, then of course you'll have to withdraw the statements. If it turns she's not correct in the proposition that she has made, you don't have to withdraw the statement. It's not a question of her giving you instructions. She's making a proposition. If you don't agree with the proposition, please say so.
Chair, if I can repeat for the umpteenth time, what was the statement that you want me to withdraw? What did I say? Verbatim. You know, we have to begin from a premise of fact.
Maybe you were told you didn't understand the proposition. Can I ask the young lady to put again their proposition to you?
In Mr. Woods' testimony yesterday, in his oral testimony, he said that Joe Mudisa benefited from the arms deal. These were his words. We would like to know what benefits he's referring to and what concrete evidence he has of these benefits.
As explained, there was a question, there was a discussion of which you also participated, Chairperson. And as is the nature, as I qualified everything I said before I started, I'm not here with concrete evidence. I make reference to reports that I believe have substance and are well argued and well sourced.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in sum, Dr. Woods, what you're saying is you have no concrete evidence.
I've never claimed to have concrete evidence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Advocate Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I am aware of the fact that it's gone way past the normal tea adjournment, but I assume by your invitation that I should continue. And
Advocate Parker, should we take the tea adjournment or should we continue?
Chair, it depends how many questions she has. If she has three questions, maybe she may be allowed, but if it's more than that, we may adjourn.
Okay.
Chair, it will certainly be more than 2 or 3 questions. I anticipate taking the balance of the hour up to lunchtime if I proceed at this stage.
Then in that case, maybe let's take an adjournment for about 10 minutes or so.
As you please.
Thank you.
confirm that you're still under oath? Say I do.
I do.
Thank you. Advocate Kay.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm advised that I was incorrect in calling Mrs. Mudisa. She in fact goes by the name of Mrs. Sidibe, and I tender my apologies to her for that. But the reason for mentioning it at this stage is that she would like your leave to ask one more question before I proceed with my cross-examination.
It's not a question, Your Honor, but I think it's for the sake of record. I just want to also remind Dr. Wood that, Conlog was not part of the arms deal, what do you call it, package, or never, maybe in short, I would like to say Conlog never benefited from the arms deal. That's all, for the sake of record.
Thanks, Chair. In the BAE IP's agreement, it lists Conlog as the biggest recipient of a industrial participation initiative.
Ma'am, I suppose you are done, eh? Thank you. Advocate Kay.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Woods, I represent the Department of Defense. I had understood that one of the main thrust of your evidence yesterday was a point you made, and I took it down. You said that your point is that dubious monies were paid by arms dealers. Now, in relation to that, let me firstly place on record that if any amounts of money were paid in connection with the arms deal that should not have been paid to any individual, the Department of Defense, with you, would also want appropriate action taken against that individual if there were any real evidence of such conduct. But the point where we depart is that you seem to cast the net very widely and taint every aspect of the arms deal, save for one, which I will indicate to you in a moment, with the probability of corruption. And that is the issue I want to debate with you on behalf of the Department of Defense. Let me, as a starting point, just outline that there were 6 items of equipment procured. Presumably you're aware of that. And in fact, save for the maritime helicopters, you actually mention the other 5 items of equipment in your statement, and I'll take you to those passages and I want to traverse them with you. The maritime helicopter, we have evidence before this commission from Admiral Kammerman, was provided by UK Westland, and that is also the company that won the evaluation phase for the best military value. I presume then you have no issue in relation to that item of equipment.
If you could just assist me, the maritime helicopters were those that were bought to go on the frigates, is that correct?
Yes, I'm willing to assist you. They were, and in fact they were acquired about a year after the other equipment.
Thank you, that's helpful. Then I concur.
Good. Then let's begin with the submarines. Now, you will pick that up at on your statement, page 12, paragraph A. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Sorry, Advocate Kane. Which page are you referring to?
Chair, I'm referring to page 12 of Dr. Woods' statement, and towards the top of the page there is a heading A, the submarine deal.
Thank you.
Dr. Woods, have you perhaps read the evidence before this commission presented by Captain Reid or by Admiral Howell?
I'm afraid I haven't, no.
You see, it is to your credit that you immediately agree you haven't read it, because they describe in detail the evaluation process, and what they also dealt with were the issues that were raised in the JIT report, and they gave evidence as to why there were certain changes during the course of the evaluation process, and that the outcome, namely that the GSC submarine won the best military value competition, was entirely in accordance with a fair and proper evaluation process. You cannot dispute that, can you?
Not without reading the documents and evaluating them against other documents which I have.
You see, Dr. Woods, even if you were to do that, you would have no personal knowledge of the facts of which they have testified, would you?
No.
And so when you deal with the submarine deal and you refer to, in fact, I took your words down in relation to paragraph 30, this is what you said. You said, the nature of the process is how to achieve a predetermined result. That is, in fact, not a statement that you can, without having considered their evidence and without any personal knowledge of the facts, responsibly make, is it?
Well, yeah, just to remind you of my methodology, that I lined up a number of arguments and a number of documents, and it's how they cross-reference to each other, whether it's the red flags on what can happen in procurement deals and how people can predetermine. It was at a stage when I was going to give you examples yesterday when the chairperson ruled that I couldn't do that. Otherwise, I would have been able to show you. So it's not too helpful just to nitpick around a little issues concerning one part of my statement. My statement is about an integration of a number of arguments and how they all speak to each other. But of course, I will oblige and entertain as best I can your questions.
Dr. Woods, your thesis is that a whole lot of factors hang together, and hanging as they do together, they would indicate corruption, but that not one single item on its own would be sufficient to sustain corruption. Did I understand you correctly?
If you're understanding that by all the information coming together, it accommodates all the information in all three of the arguments, together with two other documents which I submitted.
I understand then that you're agreeing with me.
I don't believe I've necessarily agreed with you.
Dr. Woods, it's a simple proposition. I need to understand what your evidence is in order to analyze it from the Department of Defense perspective. And in that regard, I'm concentrating on the equipment types, as I've mentioned. And the reason for doing it is because you present arguments pertaining to each equipment type, and then as a whole, you say all of this adds up to create a probability of corruption. Now, if I haven't understood you correctly, would you please indicate in what respect?
You seem to be, but correct me if I'm wrong, only referring to references I made in the second argument. Those have to be interfaced with the nature of established cases of corruption in the arms industry. It has to be interfaced with the document I produced on warning signs and procurement. It has to be interfaced with the types of breakdowns that were in process and why those breakdowns were in many cases serious and what the consequences of them could have been. So you have to look at it all the way across, as opposed to simply the second argument. But if I'm misunderstanding you, then please correct me.
Yes, I think we're making some progress. Essentially, I have indicated I am dealing with the items of equipment because they constitute one vital aspect of a whole argument you've put together. I do understand the other aspects of the argument, but for my purposes, I need to deal with the aspect that pertains to the equipment. And I need to break it down one by one, and we need to go through it together. Are you with me?
I am.
Coming back then to the submarines, I had put to you that given that Admiral Howell and Captain Reid have given evidence before this commission in which they have explained the issues that were indicated by the JIT report, and they have given evidence that the best product was procured for the Navy in accordance with the policies prescribed by MODAC and DoD Policy 4147, and that they were satisfied that the evaluation report achieved the objective of putting forward the best submarine, which was the GS, the German frigate, German submarine consortium's submarine. Given all of that, and that you haven't even considered that evidence, surely you have to accept that whatever you've submitted in this statement has not taken into account a very material body of evidence.
You'd be correct, and as far as that the reports that I refer to here have not taken account of that report, that evidence you suggest. If I'd known of that, I would have liked to have seen it, but I'm very cautious because there have been many contradictory opinions, usually very defensive opinions from the side of the department, and which in cases, as I recall, proved not to be very necessarily correct. And I think the JIT report offers you a number of examples of where they were misinformed. And of course, the admirals that you speak to would have to defend the deal the way you say it was established.
Do I understand then that you have a basic skepticism towards any of the DoD witnesses, and you approach the subject matter on the basis that their evidence is not worth taking into account?
I'm not sure the reason for your exaggerated statement. I think one has to look at every evidence critically, every piece of evidence, as I attempted to do on the reports I submitted. And I've again explained that over and over again to see who wrote it, where they got the information from, etc., etc., etc. But they don't necessarily write off just spontaneously anything that the Defensive Force says or claims. I consider it as well, and if I don't have the expertise, I try and get another opinion.
If you had been aware of the evidence of Captains Reid and Admiral Howell, you would know that the submarine that they recommended was 800 million rand cheaper than the next closest contender, the Italian bid, and that it was clearly best value for money. But you didn't know that, did you?
Well, assuming what you say is factual, or isn't it factual, but I didn't know about what the statement you just made.
And now that you do know about it, is it not the most probable inference to draw that the South African government procured the most appropriate submarine?
I would have to look into it, and as I say, I don't necessarily accept what you're saying is factual. I just can't take your word for granted, as I won't take other people's for granted.
Assume that, and I cannot necessarily say they will, but I don't want to be presumptuous, assume that the Commission will accept the evidence of Captains Reid and Admiral Howell, that in fact the submarines procured were 800 million rand cheaper than the next closest contender, then they would be perfectly entitled to dismiss any probability of corruption. Surely you don't dispute that?
If the Commission were to look at the competing arguments, and I'm sure there'll be more arguments on this issue from future witnesses, and the Commission were to look through the evaluation system and the point scoring and draw the same conclusions that you drew, I would expect them to agree that the best choice was made.
Dr. Woods, then let's look at the next item in your statement. It's on the same page, and it comes under a little B headed, the frigate deal. So that's also page 12 of your statement. Are you there? Now, in relation to the frigates, I want to ask you if you have considered at all the evidence of Admiral Kammerman.
There was a time way back in about 2000 where I discussed certain issues with Admiral Kammerman, but I'm aware he has since testified before this commission. I'm not aware of the more recent evidence that he's presented.
So if I understand your answer, you have not actually read his statement or the transcript of his evidence before this commission?
You're correct.
One of the issues he dealt with was the participation of the Germans in the competition to provide the frigates to South Africa, and he described that there had been a process in 94-95 which was aborted because the then Minister of Defence, Minister Mudisa, had decided that a national consensus was required to be achieved and instituted the Defence Review. Were you aware of that?
I do seem to recall reading that somewhere.
You see, that's an aspect where I would have expected you to perhaps have personal knowledge, because you were a member of Parliament and the Defence Review was certainly an issue before Parliament.
You know, that's an unfair statement. It appeared before the two defence committees of which I wasn't party, and there's still some argument about whether Parliament adequately considered or not, but I certainly wasn't a party to it. And I'll be quite honest with you, I have no interest in the military, never have had. So I wouldn't have gone out of my way to see what a Defence Review was about. I wouldn't have understood it.
Then you also would not have understood that subsequent to the Defence Review, the contest for the frigates was reopened and that all the countries, including Germany, in fact all 5 of them that had participated in the pre-defense review round, were invited to again compete in a fresh round of competition. You were not aware of that?
As it appears in the GIRT report.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your answer. May you please repeat it?
Yes, I was aware of that from having read the JRT report.
If you were aware of that, Dr. Woods, then you were also aware that Germany had been a party to the first round prior to the defense review and the second round of competition that began again in about 1997 as part of a number of other countries competing. Were you aware of that or not?
Yes, I was aware.
Now, were you also aware of the fact that Germany had declined to participate in the competition for the frigate prior to the April 1994 elections?
I can't recall having been aware of that.
Let me ask you one other thing. Were you aware that the predetermined evaluation process, consisting of a military evaluation, a nip and dip evaluation, and a finance evaluation, resulted in the German frigate consortium winning the evaluation? Were you aware of that?
Winning the overall, becoming the preferred bidder, is that what you're referring to?
It became the preferred bidder at a later stage as a result of a cabinet recommendation, but much earlier on, in the initial stages of evaluation according to predetermined processes, the German frigate consortium came out as the first contender. Were you aware of that?
I seem to recall that being in the sequence of events and referred to as such in the JRT report. But I also seem to remember it being very disputed as well.
When you refer to the disputes, you haven't yourself looked into the evidence of any of the witnesses with first-hand knowledge who participated in that evaluation process, have you?
As you are well aware, I've explained my methodology over and over and over again.
Yes, your methodology is to rely on press reports that indicate what you are, that support your thesis, and to avoid evidence which does not support your thesis.
I disagree with your accusation.
Dr. Woods, how else do you explain the fact that you are prepared to come before this commission and make allegations relating to these items of equipment that would indicate that there was a probability they were tainted by corruption, yet you have not even considered the evidence of the witnesses who had personal knowledge of these processes?
I once chaired a very extended Scopa committee and had a lot of evidence firsthand from the witnesses, including Mr. Carman. I took the submissions very seriously, as I did other parties. So I think your statement once again is flawed.
May I understand that? Are you saying that you chaired Scopa and that in fact you gave Admiral Kammerman the opportunity to appear before you and deal with the issues raised in relation to the arms deal?
We had many representatives from the military and its 3 arms and arms corps at a very big hearing, which received a large amount of press coverage, and we asked a number of questions across wide-ranging issues concerning the arms deal. That was in the year 2000. I cannot anticipate every question one might get on occasion like this, so I can't recall exactly what Mr. Kommerman said at the time or not, but I did meet with Mr. Kommerman. In fact, when I called for a lot of confidential documents, they were delivered to my office by Mr. Kommerman personally, who flew down from Pretoria with them, and I remember on that occasion chatting. So I have tried to listen to all sides, but I am agreeing with you that there could be other things that he could have said that would have enlightened me.
Dr. Woods, my instructions from Admiral Kommerman is that you are correct that he delivered a large mass of DoD documents to Scopa whilst you were the chairman, and much of which he delivered himself. But he says that you haven't taken them into account in your statement. There's no evidence you've read them. And he also says that you refused to see anyone from the Department of the Defense in relation to the allegations.
I disagree with that last statement. At that time, we couldn't get enough of people within the department to help clarify issues around the concerns that were brought to our attention by the Auditor General concerning the arms deal.
In paragraphs 33 and 38 of your statement, you're dealing with, I presume, the issue of the combat suite. And you refer to Thompson, Shabir Sheikh, FBS, ADS connections. In both paragraphs, you mention FBS. What is FBS?
Yeah, I think that could be a small error. There was often confusion about ADS and FBS, who had largely the same directors, and they had a connection. I think, if I'm correct, Mr. Shabir Sheikh headed up both of them once upon a time. And the allegation of Augusta paying a certain amount for submarines, I think, if I recall correctly, was alleged to have gone through FBS. But I can't recall the detail, forgive me.
No, the difficulty is, of course, in the absence of you being able to explain your own statement. It's very difficult for me to deal with it, but we'll take it up, hopefully, with somebody who has personal knowledge of these issues. But let's go to the substance of the paragraphs dealing with the combat suite. Were you aware of the fact that ADS was the only company in South Africa that was able to supply the combat suite for the frigates?
It's not what I'd be made aware of. And just to go back to your previous question, if you want to know what FBS stands for, I think it's Futuristic Business Systems.
Yes, thank you. Let's just progress to the answer you've just given, which is that it was, I thought you said it's not what you had been led to believe. In other words, we're dealing with ADS being the only South African company able to provide the combat suite?
Yes, you want me to repeat my response? That information I recall from way back when you suggested otherwise. So I'm not aware that what you say is true or not.
Well, Dr. Wood, if you had read the statement of Admiral Kammerman or heard his evidence, or even considered the documents he provided to you, you would know that Young himself has recognized this, and I'll read what Dr. Young says in this regard. In his note of 5 August 1999, he states that although ADS is a South African registered company, it is now foreign-owned. However, we recognize that there is no other single company with the requisite experience to take its place. What then gives you the ability to question the award of the subcontract for the combat suite to ADS as being possibly tainted by corruption?
You know, once again, assuming that your Mr. Kammerman is correct in what he says, I've made no reference to Mr. Young, so I would ask you to be careful with just drawing assumptions. And thirdly, I'm referring to a press report which is GGW 21. If you read and see what it says in reference to my paragraph, you'll see how far I will go on this matter.
Now, I mentioned Dr. Young's statement in that regard precisely because he competed for the combat suite and alleged that the award to ADS was tainted by corruption. And so for him to have made that concession makes it even more outrageous for you to contend the contrary. But let's progress then on this issue of subcontracts and GGW 21. Tell me, are you complaining about the award of the local subsystems or the foreign subsystems?
Or foreign or local subsystems is really irrelevant to the way and the method I'm using across a number of arguments to propose that there's a probability of corruption.
You see, Dr. Woods, it really isn't that simple or fair of you to simply brush everything with the taint of corruption. There are a number of different subsystems, some of which were local and some of which were foreign, and they were awarded to different contractors as a result of a competitive bidding process. But you can't even tell me where you make your issue. You can't even say there's a particular subsystem which I suspect was tainted by corruption. You just say it doesn't matter.
You know, I never said it doesn't matter in such a general sense. I said that point, I believe, is not relevant to the big picture that has been constructed through the many references I make, secondary source references mostly, and to my analysis thereof.
You see, then that leaves the Commission with this thesis from you. which is that if you can paint the brush widely enough, there's no need to dig down into the detail and even be specific about your allegations. You just leave this general sense that everything is somehow tainted. Is that what you intend to convey?
I don't believe I'm as immoral as that. What I intend to do here, in the short time that the Commission gave me to do it, having come from a basis of not having looked at a single arms deal document for many, many years, is to be helpful to the Commission and suggest that this statement of mine and the way I have analyzed it would perhaps give some direction to the investigation that needs to take place to see whether the probabilities I refer to do in fact have grounds or not.
You see, Dr. Woods, if you had couched your statement as just a pointer to indicate areas of concern, it would have been quite a different statement from the one you actually signed. For instance, in paragraph 13 of your statement, the last sentence, you say that the denial of any possibilities of corruption in the SDPs by the former members of the executive who have appeared before this commission is incomprehensible. Now, that's quite a strong statement from somebody who hasn't kept track of the evidence or up to date with the investigation.
You know, I think you're being a little disingenuous and perhaps also illogical. The point which I'm clearly making here is that in the face of what can happen in big procurement deals, and the bigger the deals, the higher the risk, and more especially big deals within the military for a number of reasons that pertain to the military, that to me it was incomprehensible that the members of the executive that I refer to could have simply dismissed there being any possibility of any form or any degree of corruption. That it remains incomprehensible, as it does to a lot of other intelligent people.
Yes, well, they spoke from personal knowledge, and they had no knowledge of corruption, and you yourself have accepted that the majority of the cabinet, including the witnesses before the commission, were not men who enriched themselves through this arms deal. And so it is not at all incomprehensible. They are speaking from personal knowledge. Let me carry on and go to the next item of equipment, which pertains to the Hawks. Now, at page 14 of your statement, against the letter C, you deal with the BAE deal, and what you capture thereunder seems to me to pertain to the acquisition of the Hawks. In regard to the Hawks, I presume that based on the answers you've already given, you have not considered the evidence given by former Deputy Minister of Defence, Mr. Casrals.
No, in my experience of Mr. Casrals' utterances would make me very cautious of taking his word at face value.
Now, in relation to...
Just hold on, Advocate Kane. Dr. Wood, can you just answer the question? Have you considered that statement or not?
No.
Thank you.
You see, Dr. Woods, not having considered the evidence, it really doesn't lie within your domain to argue for a credibility finding against Mr. Casrals. Surely you do accept my word of caution in that regard.
I agree that the more evidence you can consider and incorporate into the arguments you produce, and this applies to you as well, the better.
Now, just before the lunch adjournment, you transgressed into a discussion about the price of the hawks as compared to the price of the hawks procured by the Australians, and you suggested that the Australians had paid a lot less than South Africa, and I presume you intended that to be another reason from which we should infer corruption.
Those are your words. Now, you can assume that if you so wish, but I didn't say that.
Well, let's just take a step back and test what we're dealing with here. You would accept, I'm sure, that a comparison of two different militaries' equipment is very difficult because they generally do not share all the information pertaining to the specifications and the logistic support. You'd accept that, surely?
I would accept that, but on the other hand, I was very surprised in my consultations with senior officials from Airmachi and from the Czech bid as to, don't ask me how, but how much information they all had of each other's rivals and deals and specifications and pricings. And so once again, I have been quite open as to where I saw the information from and how that formed the basis of certain assumptions.
And I lay that foundation actually against myself because the information I have is at best superficial, and I do not have that very detailed comparison. But the information I have, Dr. Woods, is that South Africa paid 3,873 million for 24 hawks. The Australians paid 5,780 million rand for 33 hawks. And by just doing the very rudimentary exercise of dividing the South African rand amount by 24 and the Australian price by 33, one comes out with a comparison that indicates that in fact South Africa paid 161 million rand per hawk and Australia paid 175 million rand per hawk. Those are my instructions. Do you have any reason to dispute that that is accurate?
I would need to see the details. If you were in our case of how the many components that went onto the basic price, I'm sure the same applied in the Australian deal. One would have to compare apples with apples. But it appears that the information I've received differs to that you have at your disposal, which is right. Perhaps yours is, perhaps mine is.
Yes, and the important point is that to compare apples with apples would take quite a detailed exercise, and you would have to be assured of receiving full information. You agree?
In the case, if I were to say we paid grossly too much for the hawks, which has been suggested from a number of quarters, then I would need to base that on a fairly detailed assessment, especially if I was saying I'm coming to that conclusion when comparing it to the Australian deal. But if you go back to my earlier statement, the point you're making is not the point I was making when I made it just before tea.
You're correct. It was not a point in your statement. It was something you said before lunch. And I just want to check then that you are not actually alleging, because you have not done sufficient work to enable you to allege it, that South Africa paid far more for its hawks than any other air force.
Yes, there's no doubt that, as with many of these issues, as we proved early on today, that I've been quite open about where I get my information from, why I consider that information, that I have a lot more information I could have incorporated, but didn't have time. We also had the unfortunate incident, as my evidence leaders will tell you, where a lot of my documents somehow misplaced a few days before this hearing, and it was quite a desperate rush to try and find copies, to try and re-establish them. But I'm sorry, I'm sort of leaving your question behind. Could you just repeat it, sorry?
Dr. Woods, what I had said to you is, based on your evidence before lunch, it was not an issue in your statement. You're correct on that. You are not saying, because you haven't done the necessary analysis to enable you to responsibly say it, that South Africa overpaid or paid more for its hawks than other countries paid for theirs, are you?
I'm saying on the information that I do have, that would appear to be the case. But I accept there could be more information. And I think with many of the statements you're making, you know, I wish I could ask you some questions, because it appears that you are being very selective yourself.
Dr. Woods, if you are still...
Just hold on. Dr. Woods, you can't ask counsel questions. Counsel is here to ask you questions, and you must answer counsel's questions. It doesn't work the other way around.
I apologize, Chair. I withdraw my question.
Thank you.
Dr. Woods, I was only interested in the first part of your answer, not the second, which the chairman took up. I was interested in the first part of your answer, in which you said you were in fact making the allegation that South Africa overpaid or paid more than other countries. Now, would you then detail the exercise that you have undertaken in order to enable you to responsibly make such an allegation?
Well, if I could have anticipated this question, I would have brought documentation from me, which comes within the international military establishment, which suggested that to be the case. I've also referred to the information I was able to obtain regarding the Australian deal. And so on those indirect sources, I make a point, but I still don't recall, but I'm open to be corrected, that I'm making the statement you're attributing to me. It's certainly not made in my statement, but maybe it was made verbally in answer to a question where you claim that I said we overpaid for the hawks. You know, I just want to make sure that I did in fact say that.
Dr. Woods, it's not really a memory test, and I'm not trying to catch you out. I actually want to understand what you are saying so that I can deal with it. I can only deal with what you are saying and what evidence you've brought to this commission. So let's just be absolutely straight with one another. Are you saying that South Africa overpaid, or are you not?
I'm saying I've noted arguments and opinions which suggest that to be the case. But as I said, if we did overpay, then I would have to start saying there's something fishy there. But as I made a point all the way along, I've made no accusations of corruption. I'm working towards trying to present the Commission with a body of information that suggests there's sufficient reason to believe there's probability, so that they, in terms of their brief and the obligation to conduct an inquiry, can take these issues forward where they believe there's merit.
Well, what you do say, have a look at paragraph 83 of your statement, look at the last sentence of it, and there you conclude that the evidence presented to substantiate this situation, and you're talking about what is improper in the procurement, is almost irrefutable. That's a strong statement, Dr. Woods. It goes well beyond what you now suggest, which is just have a look at these areas that have caused me a little bit of concern, It's much stronger than that, is it not?
Well, if you wanted to, A, rubbish the Auditor General's briefing on this point, if you wanted to rubbish everything in the JRT forensic work, if you wanted to rubbish the testimony of Lieutenant General Pierre Steyn, then you could challenge me, because I'm referring here to the management control and executive oversight of the procurement process, and have supplied a lot of fairly strong evidence. And I believe that evidence substantiates the situation and is almost irrefutable. So it's a strong statement, but just get on track as to where it comes from.
All right, we'll return to that theme, but I suggest to you that you have made serious allegations in your statement that go well beyond simply indicating where corruption could be and needs to be investigated, and that's why I'm going through it in the detail I am. Let's have a look at the issue of the non-costed option of acquiring the Hawk. We're still dealing with the Hawk. Now, in that regard, were you aware that the cockpit fitted in the Hawk was designed to emulate that of the Gripen?
Yes, I was.
And were you aware that that enabled the training of fighter pilots in a 3-tier system in the best way possible?
I recall the proposal for the 3-tier system, which I think was later changed to 2, wasn't it?
You can take it from me that the evidence has been categorical from a number of witnesses, including General Bain and a number of others, that in fact we changed for a short period to a 2-tier system and back to the 3-tier system prior to the acquisition of the Hawks and the Gripen. And so what we were facing was a 3-tier system. Were you aware of that?
Yeah, my memory fails me. I don't know. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Now, in relation to the Hawk, one of the other major attractions to it was that it was actually capable of engaging in combat, not merely training pilots. Were you aware of that?
Yeah, I recall reading that somewhere, yes.
And so when the former President Mbeki and former Deputy Minister of Defence, Minister Casrils, gave their evidence with reference to written recordals of their reasons for acquiring the Hawks, which included some of those I have given to you, you surely don't suggest that they are lying and misleading this Commission as to the true reason for making the decision to acquire the Hawks?
Yeah, the first reasons given by the Minister, Department of Trade and Industry, were the reason for the superior offset deals that British BAE offered on the Hawks. When he was challenged on that, his reasons were later changed to say that it was the migration from the Hawks as a trainer aircraft to the Gripen as a fighter aircraft made sense as opposed to the Air Machi to the Gripen. Of course, in the JET report, there are three opinions that the forensic guys got that contest that view. The view of Air Machi itself, who showed in some detail that the migration from the Air Machi to the Gripen was far smaller than the migration from the then impalas to the cheetahs. So one gets all these contesting views, and I appreciate where you're coming from and where your view comes from. I have to look at it more widely.
In getting the contesting views, surely one defers to the view of the person entrusted to make the decision at the time, and surely if that is made on a rational basis, one would be irresponsible to then cry corruption.
Well, I don't know who's crying corruption. I certainly am not. But you have a tendency to rely on officials within the DOD, the wider DOD, and ask me to respond to their opinions as if they are gospel fact. I can't do that.
Dr. Woods, I accept that you can't do what you have just described, but it's not what I am seeking to do at all. I'm presenting to you a summary of the evidence which I submit you should have read, emanating from the former President and former Deputy Minister, backed up by minutes from ministerial committees in which they describe the reasons for acquiring the hawk. And I'm saying to you that you can't possibly suggest from your vantage point that their reasons were irrational or so irrational as to indicate corruption, can you?
I couldn't and I wouldn't.
The next item in your statement is page 15, D, the Augusta deal. So we're now dealing with the light utility helicopters. And it in fact means that we have progressed nicely through the list of equipment. Now in that regard, General Viljoen gave evidence, and his evidence was that there was no tampering with the evaluation process or the value system, and that the Augusta was the type of equipment that won the best military value. You can't contest that, can you?
No, I can't, but once again, I have to take into account opposing views, and in this regard, I'm very hopeful that the chairperson succeeds in getting Messrs. Holden and Van Vuren before this commission, because one of the strongest contesting views is in their book, The Devil's in the Detail.
Yes, and if you had read the evidence, you would know that the various officials with personal knowledge have been confronted with the allegations in Van Holden and Van Vuren's book, and they have dealt with those allegations. But you're not aware of that, are you?
Well, you know, from your vantage point, it would appear in every case that your officials have dealt with the situation and given honest answers. I don't necessarily accept that.
Now, the other interesting aspect of some of the answers you've given is that you rely on, it seems, meetings that you've had with losers, people who lost out on the tender process. And so, for instance, you referred to the Aeromacchi, the Italians, when I was dealing with the Hawks, and now you seem to rely on evidence of Bell, who lost out in the contest with Augusta. So do you not see that you are relying on the say-so of people who are the losers in a tender process?
Yes, I am, and I'm very supportive of the point you're making. As happens in any number of procurement deals, losers are often aggrieved where they're not justified to be so. Hopefully I do try to take that into account.
Thank you. Then the sixth item of equipment doesn't appear in the same order in your statement. It is the Alpha, or the Gripens, the Advanced Light Fighter Aircraft. Now, in that regard, the evidence before the Commission has been that the Grippens won the contest for the best military value. In other words, they satisfied all the military's technical specifications and were the most economically priced. In those circumstances, one would not generally look for a probability or occasion of corruption because South Africa procured the best priced equipment. Do you differ with me?
No, I share that understanding. I think from what I recall of going through in detail of the evaluation and selection process, that the Griffin was most likely a deserved winner.
Then if I may ask you to turn to page 21 of your statement where you deal with General Pierre Stein's evidence. And may I ask the same question again? There may be a different answer to this one since you have quoted from him, but have you read his statement and his evidence before this commission?
I haven't read the full statement, no.
Where did you actually procure these quotations that are set out at page 21 and 22 of your statement?
I can't recall exactly. I would imagine I got them from the Commission's website.
The Commission published a summary of his evidence to forewarn people prior to him, or a summary of his statement, I should say, to forewarn those who may have an interest in his evidence prior to him giving his evidence. Do you think you perhaps obtained these quotations from there?
I could be incorrect, but I begin to think I might have got the statement from my evidence leaders. They will correct me if I'm incorrect.
All right, I do recognize, in fairness to you, some of these quotations as being taken from his statement, but I couldn't find all of them, which is the reason for my questioning. I couldn't locate the source of all of them in General Stein's statement. But be that as it may, then let me go back to my first question. Have you read that statement, or do you not recall?
I read the statement that was given to me, but I suspect it wasn't the full statement.
Now, when you rely on General Stein, I understand it to be one of the pillars of your overall thesis that there was corruption in the arms deal. Is my understanding perhaps too superficial?
Obviously, my thesis doesn't conclude that there was corruption in the arms deal. May I correct you just once again on that? No, Pierre Stein's, the references that I include here, and which I elaborated on yesterday, are just another source which tends to agree with the JRT's observations and the earlier Auditor General's observations that the processes were weak to the point that all sorts of opportunities for any number of irregularities and even corruption were possible. I do suggest that the third of the three references I make, the one to Lieutenant General Pierre Stein, does carry some authority. He was the Secretary for Defense. He was present. I also mentioned yesterday that I interviewed him way back then, made my own notes, so I was aware of a number of these observations that he had made. I also referred you to an interview that was conducted with him by the JAT forensic people, which was in the first draft, but which was mysteriously absent from the final draft of the JIT report, bar 2 sentences.
Dr. Woods, that was a long answer, but let's come back to the question. You have not read the evidence of Mr. Steyn in this commission, neither did you read his cross-examination or the documents upon which he relied and in relation to which he was cross-examined. That's the current state of play, am I right?
Well, firstly, if the document I did receive is not the full testimony, then you would be correct on the first point. But you're certainly correct on the second point. I never saw any supporting documentation that you refer to.
And you haven't read the transcript in which his oral evidence was given and he was cross-examined before this commission, have you?
You're correct.
You see, because it is really, I submit, irresponsible of you to have as one of the pillars of your thesis of corruption the evidence of a person when you have not read their testimony and you have simply opportunistically extracted snippets from what seems to be a summary of a statement.
For the umpteenth time, it's not a thesis on corruption. I think you really need to get this straight. Secondly, your words are calling this a pillar. I don't refer to it as a pillar. I don't present it as a pillar. So I don't know why you're using that exaggerated word for what effect. Thirdly, you say I extracted nothing. I was given a document. This is the document.
Dr. Woods, let's have a look at your own words in paragraph 66 at page 26 of your statement. In the last sentence of that paragraph, you say the following: in the case of the SDP exercise, the PwC and Lieutenant General Steyn have clearly destroyed the illusion of compliance which government presented. Now, that I submit to you, in the absence of having considered his evidence, is in fact an irresponsible statement.
Well, I disagree with you, and I believe I have an expertise in this field which you don't have.
Now, if you would please indicate to me in what respect it is that General Steyn's evidence would indicate that there was merely an illusion of compliance and would assist you in drawing your conclusion that this was a farce, contrived, predetermined decisions were being made, and it was an appalling exercise in deceit. Those are your allegations. What does General Steyn say that makes you believe that to be the case?
To unravel your manipulations of my words. And you made a number of points. I hope I can recall them all. To single out Lieutenant General Steyn's reference here is disingenuous. I put it together in a package with the SDP exercise and the PwC forensic exercise. And I say those together. Maybe Pierre Steyn and my assessment was a relatively minor part. As hard as you try to elevate it, is to the only part. And it destroys the illusion of compliance, because as we mentioned earlier on, the ministers insisted that there was total compliance, that the deal and the processes and the structures and the practices were perfect. There was no chance of anything going wrong. And that's on record from the ministers. You then jump to the first paragraph of 66, where I'm not talking necessarily about the arms deal. I'm talking generally about something that continually happens and which the Auditor General often refers to and which we all witness in our own way when we see exposés come, that it appeared that in a big procurement deal, all the boxes were ticked. But we learn how devious people can be in giving that illusion of compliance, where in the end there wasn't compliance and where corruption took place or big mistakes happened. Now, I can give you any number of examples on that, as can the Auditor General. But if you don't agree, that's your right.
Dr. Woods, I want to bring you back to the question, and I apologize if the question was too long. Let me make it a lot simpler. We're dealing with General Steyn, and he is employed in your statement as part of the reasons, you would say, or indications of corruption. And my question was, what in particular does General Steyn alert you to that causes this concern?
Repeat your question, but this time to leave out the words that this is alluding to corruption. It's not. It's alluding to the failure and weaknesses of systems. Could you just get that straight, and then maybe we can make some progress?
That's a helpful answer, thank you. So General Steyn's position and authority is not being used to indicate corruption. It's being used to indicate merely a breakdown in process, you say?
Read my statement, please.
Just so, Dr. Woods, the question is simple. Please answer the question. It's simple and straightforward.
It's in my statement.
Dr. Woods, a proposition was made to you. Is that correct or is that not correct?
Well, I've made the point a few moments ago, which suggested it wasn't correct. I've said as much, but maybe,
Thank you.
maybe I need to refer it another way.
That's all that I wanted to understand. So you say the proposition is not correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is in your statement, Dr. Woods, is paragraph 61, which appears immediately below the heading dealing with Pierre Steyn. Let me read it to you. The above evidence of the SDP procurement exercise having been open to manipulation is indisputable. This is, however, further reinforced by the testimony of the former Defence Secretary to the Commission. So what I understand you are saying is that it merely indicates a breakdown of process, and we're not dealing with a corrupt manipulation. Is my understanding correct?
Sorry, you're a bit too quick for me there. I missed the paragraph you're referring to, so I was unable to follow you.
If you would turn to paragraph 61, are you there now?
Thank you.
Now, you indicated to me that you were merely indicating a breakdown of process. I wrote down your words, and not a corrupt manipulation. And so when I read paragraph 61, that is all I must understand by your words.
Absolutely, but you were earlier referring to, and you were speaking to paragraph 66, and you were quoting from there. But the same point I made there applies to 62 as well.
Then I know what we're dealing with. Now, the evidence of General Steyn pertained mostly to his unhappiness in a few aspects pertaining to minute keeping, which we dealt with, pertaining to the acquisition of the Hawks because they were more expensive than the Aeromachi, which was traversed before this commission. But there was a very important part of his evidence. He made it clear that he did not make any allegation that Mr. Mudisa was in favor of any particular contractor or product, such as the hawk. Were you aware of that?
I wasn't aware he made such a statement, but I have no reason to doubt it.
And he went further and denied that there was no impression that he had that any member of the procurement team was in favor of any particular contractor. He said he had no such impression. Were you aware of that?
I'm not aware of him making that statement, no.
Just for the record, Mr. Chair, it appears at transcript page 6753, lines 8 to 15. Certainly. The transcript I'm referring to is transcript page 6753, lines 8 to 15. Dr. Woods, Mr. Esterhazy made a similar statement. He was asked, and I quote, "Do you have any impression that Minister Mudisa had any type of informal or behind-the-scenes relationship with any other UK equipment manufacturer?" And his answer was, "I have no indication of such a relationship." You weren't aware of that, were you?
I wasn't aware that that statement was made. But what I can say, but Chair, it would amount to hearsay, but in my interview of Mr. Steyn, he did tell me that there was a friendship between the late Minister Mudisa and senior executives of BAE. He never made any accusations, but he did suggest there was a friendship, and told me that at times, I think the Air Force had to fly Mr. Mudisa over to the UK just to meet with his friends there.
Sorry, Dr. Woods, I perhaps didn't hear you correctly. Who gave you this information?
Lieutenant General Pierre Steyn.
Yes, well, it's not his evidence under oath. Would you please turn to page 29 of your statement? It is the page upon which you have your diagram of the process for selecting equipment, starting with the evaluation stage and ending with the cabinet. Are you there?
I am, thank you.
May I ask you, do you have any personal knowledge of General Nyanda's position or role?
If I recall, he became head of the Defence Force. Am I correct?
Yes, he became chief of the Defence Force. Do you have any personal knowledge of his role in the acquisition process?
No, I don't. And strangely, his name has never really featured much in the large volume of material that I have.
My instructions are that he played no role in the acquisition process other than to sit as a member of the AAC. You dispute that?
No, I don't.
Let us do the same exercise in regard to Mr. Chippy Sheikh. What is your personal knowledge, if any, of his role in the acquisition process?
Again, my sources are secondary. I would refer there's numerous references in the forensic work by PricewaterhouseCoopers. But from numerous minutes of various meetings, whether whether they're from Softcom, whether they're from the combined meetings between the AAC and AASB, from the Cabinet Subcommittee where Chippy Sheikh used to do the minutes. I gathered a lot of information which gave me a lot of insights into his role.
Dr. Woods, do you know what position he held?
I'm not sure of the exact, but it's head of acquisitions, words to that effect.
Yes, he was the chief of acquisitions. Would it not therefore be entirely right and proper as the chief of acquisitions to be heavily involved in the acquisition process?
In terms of international best practice, that would not be advisable.
You suggest that you should not have a person with the responsibility of being chief of acquisition.
That's a silly statement, but the point being here that in numerous documented cases of corruption and procurement, one has to always be guarded of decisions actually being made at the bottom and then sold upwards. And for that reason, you have divisions of responsibility, which serves as checks and balances. For one person to having had some involvement at the valuation stage, to chair Softcom most of the time because Mr. Esterhuizen often wasn't there, and then to be doing the presentations from PowerPoint presentations all the way up, including into cabinet, places an individual into a very, very strong position. So I'm not accusing Mr. Chippy Sheikh of being corrupt, but I'm just saying in the section of this statement which precedes this diagram, that this is just an illustration of how, was the word careless? I'm not sure. Everybody was regarding having best practices in place and best procedures in place, and keeping the divisions the way they are, because those were established internationally for very, very good reason and were established through a very, very hard experience.
May I outline a set of facts to you? I want you to assume them to be correct. So I'm painting a scenario. The scenario is that Mr. Chippy Sheikh had no role in the bottom evaluation phase in your diagram. So the foot of the diagram, the evidence there is people with first-hand knowledge of the process described that he had no influence or role in that process at all. The scenario I then paint is that he coordinated the results from the evaluation phase, and the evidence is that those results that he coordinated as chair of Softcom matched the results from the evaluation teams and did not change at any point in the chain upwards. If that were the truth in the scenario and the evidence that were to be accepted by this commission, would you then accept that Mr. Sheikh's role as chief of acquisition was not an improper influence over the process?
Now, even if that was correct, I would still say in terms of universally accepted best practice, it wouldn't be a good thing. It would be considered improper. But I could just refer you on the first point you made to the JRT report, where they indicate that Chippy Sheikh did intervene in nip and dip evaluations and in fact imposed evaluation methods from Softcom, which took the place of the original evaluation methods. Whether you're correct or the forensic guys are correct, I'm open to learn.
Yes, well, the evidence has been that Mr. Chippy Sheikh did not intervene in this evaluation phase, and there was no manipulation of the results to which you've referred, Dr. Woods. what is it then that you find objectionable, given my scenario, in relation to Mr. Chippy Sheikh's role? Would you be specific?
The only thing I find objectionable is that best practices weren't applied. And as best practices, which I do describe somewhere in my report, are the collective experience of many, many countries who've established what the rules should be, what the practices should be, and these have been established for very, very good reason. And when we depart from that, as the Auditor General pointed out, the JRT reported out, and let me leave out Pierre Steyn, and as I'm trying to point out in an illustration here, and I do say this is an illustration. I could have perhaps compiled one of a number of other individuals to show that perhaps they bridged committee structures that is ill-advised. I don't go beyond that.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair.
I suppose Albert Kane was the last person to cross-examine. Gentleman from...
Mr. Chair, I did indicate yesterday that I would consider cross-examination, but it seems that there would be no purpose to that now after the evidence given this morning.
Thank you. I suppose there's no other person who wants to cross-examine. Thank you. Advocate Brown.
Thanks, Chair. That concludes the evidence of Dr. Woods. Chair, I must just mention that the next witness will be Dr. Crawford Brown, and we would then appreciate if the Commission could postpone his evidence to a date to be announced.
Thank you. First of all, maybe let me thank Dr. Woods for coming to the Commission and testifying. Oh, do you want to say something?
If I may, Chair, just as a concluding comment to thank you for this opportunity. I wish you'd given me more time to further strengthen my statement. I hope my statement is of some use to the Commission. But perhaps my biggest thank you through yourself, and I would imagine Advocate Ndumbi is the person who really deserves thanks, is for the 3 evidence leaders that were assigned to me. They've been an absolute pleasure to work with. They've taught me a lot. Their commitment, their hardworkingness, their professionalism, and also I think just the great human beings that they are. Thanks very much.
Thank you for the kind words, Dr. Woods. We must also thank you as a Commission for your assistance and for agreeing to come and give evidence. I hope what you have said to us today will help us to try and determine exactly what happened. And secondly, looking Parker, as I understand it, you're saying that the next witness is going to be Mr. Crawford Brown, but then you're still trying to arrange a date with him.
Thanks, Joe. We're trying to arrange date and also prepare his statement.
Thank you. So if we adjourn now, we are going to come back on a date to be arranged. We're unable to announce a date now.
Thanks, Joe. We are unable to give a certain date, and we'll appreciate if the date will be announced in the near future.
Thank you, Advocate Parker. We'll now adjourn to a date to be announced. As soon as, there's an agreement between the evidence leaders and Mr. Crawford Brown about the date on which Mr. Crawford Brown will testify, we'll make a public announcement. Thank you. We'll adjourn now.